Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 10 of Mr. N Reads Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Today we are going to be finishing the penultimate chapter of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or second to last chapter, chapter 16 through the Trapdoor. In our last episode, we read the first half of this chapter where Harry, Ron, and Hermione have now finished all of their exams. They're thrilled about it. Harry's a little surprised he was able to make it through when all he can think about is seeing Voldemort in the forest. But they have finished them. They go outside to kind of celebrate and relax. And Harry starts to put together this thought about how did Hagrid wind up with that dragon's egg in the first place? Suddenly, Harry becomes incredibly suspicious and says to the others, "Come on, we need to get to Hagrid's hut." They run down to Hagrid's hut, they sit with him, and they begin to talk about the night that Hagrid acquired the egg. Hagrid tells him that he won it in a card game with a Greek chappie from down at the pub. But that Greek chappie never showed his face. The kids wondered, wasn't it suspicious that the one thing that Hagrid wanted more than anything else was a dragon's egg? And this traveler just so happened to have one that he lost to Hagrid in a card game? Hagrid goes on to explain that he made sure that the traveler understood that he could handle it. He dealt with lots of different kinds of beasts because this Greek chappie didn't want that dragon's egg to go to just any old home. So Hagrid said he explained to him about Fluffy, and how if Hagrid was able to handle Fluffy, he could definitely handle a dragon. And he explained to that Greek chappie that all you need to do is play him a little music, and he goes right to sleep. At this, fear shoots into the heart of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and they go running from Hagrid's hut. Because they have realized that underneath that hood, they say, was either Voldemort or Snape. And Hagrid has just told him how to get past Fluffy. And they realize they need to tell Dumbledore. Because Hermione reminds Harry that everybody says that Dumbledore is the only one that Voldemort is afraid of. And as long as Dumbledore is at Hogwarts, no harm can come to the stone, no harm can come to any of the kids. They find Professor McGonagall in the hallway and tell her they have to speak to Dumbledore about what's going on. Professor McGonagall explains to them Dumbledore's just been called away on a very urgent mission to the Ministry of Magic. So now Dumbledore is not at Hogwarts, the one thing that could keep Voldemort from acquiring the stone was Dumbledore being there, and now he's gone. And at this, Harry decides that tonight is the night. They are going to sneak out and get the stone for themselves before Voldemort can get his hands on it and return to power. So they go to get ready to sneak out when they are stopped by Neville standing up to them. And that's where we're going to pick up again. We're going to pick up halfway down page 272 in chapter 16 through the Trapdoor.
"You can't go out," said Neville. "You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble."
"You don't understand," said Harry. "This is important." But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate.
"I won't let you do it,"
he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole.
I'll fight you."
"Neville!" Ron exploded. "Get away from that hole and don't be an idiot."
Don't you call me an idiot," said Neville. "I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. And you were the one who told me to stand up to people." "Yes, but not to us," said Ron in exasperation.
"Neville, you don't know what you're doing."
He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. "Go on, then. Try and hit me," said Neville, raising his fists. "I'm ready." Harry turned to Hermione. "Do something," he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. "Neville," she said, "I'm really, really sorry about this." She raised her wand. "Petrificus totalis," she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. His legs sprang together. His whole body rigid, he swayed where he stood, and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws were jammed together so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. "What have you done to him?" Harry whispered. "It's the full body bind," said Hermione miserably. "Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry." "We had to, Neville. No time to explain," said Harry. "You'll understand later, Neville," said Ron, as they stepped over him, pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. At the foot of the first set of stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. "Oh, let's kick her, just this once," Ron whispered in Harry's ear. But Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase up to the third floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. "Who's there?" he said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. "No, you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you a ghoulie, or a ghostie, or a wee student beastie?" He rose up in the air and floated there, squinting at them. "Should call Filch, I should, if something's a-creeping around unseen." Harry had a sudden idea. "Peeves," he said in a hoarse whisper. "The Bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible." Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. "So sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir," he said greasily. My mistake. I didn't see you. Of course I didn't. You're invisible. Forgive old Peevesy his little joke, sir." "I have business here, Peeves," croaked Harry. "Stay away from this place tonight." "I will, sir, I most certainly will," said Peeves, rising up in the air again. "Hope your business goes well, Baron. I'll not bother you." And he scooted off. "Brilliant, Harry," whispered Ron. A few seconds later, they were there, outside the third-floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. "Well, there you are," Harry said quietly. "Snape's already got past Fluffy." Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon all three of them what was facing them. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other two. "If you want to go back, I won't blame you," he said. "You can take the cloak. I won't need it now." Don't be stupid, said Ron. We're coming, said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. As the door creaked, low, rumbling growls met their ears. All three of the dog's noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. "What's that at its feet?" Hermione whispered. "Looks like a harp," said Ron. "Snape must have left it there." "It must wake up the moment you stop playing," said Harry. "Well, here goes." He put Hagrid's flute to his lips and blew. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note, the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew breath. Slowly, the dog's growls ceased. It tottered on its paws and fell to its knees. Then it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. "Keep playing," Ron warned Harry as they slipped out of the cloak and crept toward the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," said Ron, peering over the dog's back. "Want to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "All right." Ron gritted his teeth and stepped carefully over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the ring of the trapdoor, which swung up and open. "What can you see?" Hermione said anxiously. "Nothing, just black. There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop." Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. "You want to go first?" Are you sure?" said Ron. "I don't know how deep this thing goes." "Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep." Harry handed the flute over. In the few seconds' silence, the dog growled and twitched, but the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into its deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of the bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by his fingertips. Then he looked up at Ron and said, "If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the owlry and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right?" "Right," said Ron. "See you in a minute. I hope." And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell down, 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 and flump! With a funny, muffled sort of thump, he landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around. His eyes were not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. "It's okay," he called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trap door. "It's a soft landing. You can jump." Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled next to Harry. "What's this stuff?" were his first words. "Dunno. Some sort of plant thing. I suppose it's here to break the fall." "Come on, Hermione!" The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. "We must be miles under the school," she said. "Lucky this plant thing's here, really," said Ron. "Lucky?" shrieked Hermione. "Look at you both." She leapt up and struggled toward a damp wall. She had to struggle, because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. "Stop moving," Hermione ordered them. "I know what this is. It's Devil's Snare." "Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help," snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. "Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it," said Hermione. "Well, hurry up! I can't breathe," Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. "Devil's Snare, Devil's Snare. What did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the damp." "So light a fire," Harry choked. "Yes, of course." "But there's no wood," Hermione cried, wringing her hands. "Have you gone mad?" Ron bellowed. "Are you a witch or not?" "Oh, right," said Hermione, and she whipped out her wand, waved it, and muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flame she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were able to pull free. "Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Hermione," said Harry as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. "Yeah," said Ron, "and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood, honestly." "This way," said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway which was the only way forward. All they could hear, apart from their footsteps, was the gentle drip of water trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt of the heart, he remembered the dragons said to be guarding vaults in the Wizard's Bank. If they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, Norbert had been bad enough. "Can you hear something?" Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling and clinking seemed to be coming from up ahead. "Do you think it's a ghost?" "I don't know. Sounds like wings to me." "There's a light ahead. I can see something moving." They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceiling arching high above them. It was full of small, jewel-bright birds, fluttering and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. "Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room?" said Ron. "Probably," said Harry. "They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if they all swooped down at once, well, there's no other choice. I'll run." He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him any second. But nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even when Hermione tried her Alohomora charm. "Now what?" said Ron. "These birds, they can't be here just for decoration," said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering. Glittering? "They're not birds," Harry said suddenly. "They're keys, winged keys. Look carefully." So that must mean... He looked around. the chamber while the other two squinted up at the flock of keys. Yes, look! Broomsticks! We've got to catch the key to the door. But there are hundreds of them. Ron examined the lock on the door. We're looking for a big, old-fashioned one, probably silver, like the handle. They each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring into the midst of the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched keys darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch one. Not for nothing, though. Was Harry the youngest seeker in a century? He had a knack for spotting things other people didn't. After a minute's weaving about through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that had a bent wing, as if it had already been caught and stuffed roughly into the keyhole. "That one!" he called to the others. "That big one! There! No, there! With bright blue wings, the feathers all crumpled on one side." Ron was speeding in that direction that Harry was pointing, crashed into the ceiling, and nearly fell off his broom. "We've got to close in on it," Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. "Ron, you come at it from above. Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down. And I'll try and catch it. Right? Now!" Ron dived. Hermione rocketed upward. The key dodged them both, and Harry streaked after it. It sped toward the wall. Harry leaned forward and, with a nasty crunching noise, pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chamber. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, the key struggling in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned. It worked. The moment the lock had clicked open, the key took flight again, looking very battered now that it had been caught twice. "Ready?" Harry asked the other two, his hand on the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all. But as they stepped into it, light suddenly flooded the room to reveal an astonishing sight. They were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard. Behind the black chessmen, which were all taller than they were, and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. "Now what do we do?" Harry whispered. "It's obvious, isn't it?" said Ron. "We've got to play our way across the room." Behind the white pieces, they could see another door. "How?" said Hermione nervously. "I think," said Ron, "we're going to have to be chessmen." He walked up to a black knight and put his hand out to touch the knight's horse. At once, the stone sprang to life, the horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmeted head to look down at Ron. "Do we have to join you to get across?" The Black Knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. "This needs thinking about," he said. "I suppose we've got to take the place of 3 of the black pieces." Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally he said, "Now don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are that good at chess." "We're not offended," said Harry quickly. "Just tell us what to do." "Well, Harry, you take the place of that bishop. And Hermione, You go there instead of that castle. What about you? I'm going to be a knight, said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because at these words a knight, a bishop, and a castle turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Harry, Ron, and Hermione took. White always plays first in chess, said Ron, peering across the board. Yes, look! A white pawn had moved forward 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? Harry, move diagonally 4 squares to the right. Their first real shock came when their other knight was taken. The White Queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board, where he lay quite still, face down. Had to let that happen, said Ron, looking shaken. Leaves you free to take that bishop, Hermione. Go on. Every time one of their men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon, there was a huddle of limp black players slumped along the wall. Twice, Ron only just noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as they had lost black ones. We're nearly there, he muttered suddenly. Let me think. The White Queen turned her blank face toward him. Yes, said Ron softly. It's the only way. I've got to be taken. No! Harry and Hermione shouted. That's chess, snapped Ron. You've got to make some sacrifices. I'll make my move, and she'll take me. That leaves you free to checkmate the king, Harry. But do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron, look! If you don't hurry up, he'll already have the stone. There was no alternative. Ready? Ron called, his face pale but determined. Here I go. Now don't hang around once you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron hard against the head with her stone arm, and he crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed, but stayed on her square. The White Queen dragged Ron to one side. He looked as if he'd been knocked out. Shaking, Harry moved 3 spaces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear. With one last desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up the next passageway. What if He'll be all right, said Harry, trying to convince himself. What do you reckon's next? We've had sprouts. That was the devil's snare. Flitwick must have put charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's. They had reached another door. All right, Harry whispered. Go on. Harry pushed it open. A disgusting smell filled their nostrils, making both of them pull their robes up over their noses. Eyes watering, they saw, flat on the floor in front of them, a troll even larger than the one they had tackled, out cold with a bloody lump on its head. I'm glad we didn't have to fight that one, Harry whispered as they stepped carefully over one of its massive legs. Come on, I can't breathe. He pulled open the next door. both of them hardly daring to look at what came next. But there was nothing very frightening in here, just a table with 7 differently shaped bottles standing on it in a line. "Snapes," said Harry. "What do we have to do?" They stepped over the threshold, and immediately a fire sprang up behind them in the doorway. It wasn't ordinary fire either. It was purple. At the same instant, black flames shot up in the doorway leading onward. They were trapped. "Look!" Hermione seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottles. Harry looked over her shoulder to read it. "Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. 1 among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers, waiting hidden in line. Choose, unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we give you these clues 4. First, however slyly the poison tries to hide, you will always find some on nettle wine's left side. Second, different are those who stand at either end, but if you would move onward, neither is your friend. Third, as you see clearly, all are different size. Neither dwarf nor giant holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second on the right are twins once you taste them, though different at first sight." Hermione let out a great sigh, and Harry, amazed, saw that she was smiling. The very last thing he felt like doing. "Brilliant," said Hermione. "This isn't magic. It's logic, a puzzle. A lot of the greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck in here forever." "But so will we, won't we?" "Of course not," said Hermione. "Everything we need is here on this paper. 7 bottles. 3 are poison. 2 are wine. 1 will get us safely through the black fire, and 1 will get us back through the purple." "But how do we know which to drink?" "Give me a minute." Hermione read the paper several times. Then she walked up and down the lines of bottles, muttering to herself and pointing at them. At last, she clapped her hands. "Got it," she said. "The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire, toward the stone." Harry looked at the tiny bottle. "There's only enough there for 1 of us," he said. "That's hardly 1 swallow." They looked at each other. "Which one will get you back through the purple flames?" Hermione pointed at a rounded bottle at the right end of the line. "You drink that," said Harry. "No, listen. Get back and get Ron. Grab brooms from the flying key room. They'll get you out of the trapdoor and past Fluffy. Go straight to the owlry and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really." "But Harry, what if you know who's with him?" "Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I?" said Harry, pointing at his scar. I might get lucky again. Hermione's lip trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. Hermione! Harry, you're a great wizard, you know? I'm not as good as you, said Harry, very embarrassed as she let go of him. Me? Said Hermione. Books and cleverness. There are more important things. Friendship and bravery and... Oh, Harry, be careful. You drink first, said Harry. You are sure which is which, aren't you? Positive, said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle at the end and shuddered. It's not poison? Said Harry anxiously. No, but it's like ice. Quick, go, before it wears off. Good luck. Take care. Go! Hermione turned and walked straight through the purple fire. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He turned to face the black flames. Here I come, he said, and he drained the little bottle in one gulp. It was indeed as though ice was flooding his body. He put the bottle down and walked forward. He braced himself, saw the black flames licking his body, but couldn't feel them. For a moment, he could see nothing but dark fire. Then he was on the other side, in the last chamber. There was already someone there. But it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. It was Quirrell. And that's where we are stopping today. We will read the entirety of chapter 17 in the next episode. I can't wait to finish this incredible novel with you guys. See you soon.